Hi everyone. I'm really happy everyone could join us today. I hope you can hear me well. This is our second webinar we are doing, and really happy that you can all join us today. So I think the purpose of this is to give an update, basically what we've been doing the past month, talk a little bit about our market outlook, and also we are taking questions. So if you haven't already, please send in your questions, and we do a little bit of a Q&A at the end of this webinar. And maybe start with a little bit of an introduction about Apollo Capital. Most of you probably know something about Apollo already, but just very quickly, Apollo is a crypto fund. So we started February 1st, and the thinking behind the fund is that it's really hard to get exposure to the crypto market. And with a fund like this, we handle the difficult parts in terms of custody of these assets, and we have a team to research these assets on a daily basis. We think there's a big upside in crypto. It's a new, we believe, an emerging new asset class that investors will want exposure to. And it's still relatively small. It's the total market cap of crypto is around $325 billion. So all of crypto is smaller than one company like Facebook, for example, is around $490 billion in market cap. So it's a new field. It's only been around since 2009. It's developing very quickly. And the team at Apollo is, I think, quite unique. We have background in global financial markets, in crypto, of course. We've been investing in the crypto markets for 4 or 5 years ourselves, and from VC as well. So it's a really interesting field. It combines cryptography with financial markets, with economics. That makes it really, really interesting, I think, to work in. And the fund is based here in Australia. It's a unit trust open for wholesale investors. So you need to be a wholesale investor or sophisticated investor to invest in the fund. I think the definition of that is that you need an annual income of $250,000 for the past 2 years, or a net worth of $2.5 million, or if you invest $500,000, you're considered a wholesale or sophisticated investor. And the fund is liquid, so we take monthly applications. Applications for next month close next week, and redemptions are quarterly as well. So it's a liquid fund. The assets we invest in are mostly liquid. The crypto markets trade 24/7. They never close. So most of the assets we invest in are liquid. We have a quite open mandate to invest in cryptocurrencies across the board. So we do ICOs, we do listed crypto investments, and we do some shorter term trading as well. So that's a little bit about Apollo. We think this is a great vehicle for institutional wholesale investors to get exposure to this emerging new asset class, and I think we have built a really unique team around this. So let's talk a little bit about the market and the performance so far. So in February we posted a net return of plus 5.17%. I think that was pretty good. The average crypto hedge fund, according to Eureka Hedge Fund Index, for example, was down 14.89% in February. March was really tough for the crypto market. So we saw some big losses. Media has reported that the biggest crypto fund out there, Pantera, at least one of the biggest, I think they have over 700 million under management, reported a loss of around 50% in March. We were down 34% in March, and I think according to Eureka, the last update I've seen, that hedge fund index was down around 34% as well in March. Since we started the fund February 1st, the market is down around 50%, and that's the listed assets. There is no real index yet around crypto assets, and I think the ICO markets are down more than 50%. That's the feeling I have. I think we've been managing this downturn by a few things. So we have had a quite substantial cash position in the books. So we ended the quarter with 30% net cash and receivables. I think we also been really conservative when it comes to ICOs. So we started investing at the end of the ICO boom, I would say. We have had some 6% plus in 3 ICOs at the end of the quarter, and they're all of them are listed and trading already. So we've been really conservative when it comes to ICOs. There is so much supply out there, and we are quite conservative and selective, I would say, when it comes to that market. So that has certainly helped us. And also, I think there's been a flight to good quality crypto assets. So I think that's the third part that has helped us. And of course, as a fund, we can do some activities that are not directly related to the market price. So, for example, we can engage in futures trading. We've done a little bit of that. We can do lending, for example, of crypto assets to increase income. We have started doing that as well this month in April. And I think we have seen a nice rebound in the market since the lows. So I think that will really help us going forward. And I think also it's looking at, for example, Bitcoin is currently trading at around 8,000. It was recently trading at around 20,000. So I think you can make a good argument that today is actually a good time to potentially invest money in this market. So we are deploying some of that cash in the market right now. Our cash position is down to around 25% today, from 36% at the end of the month. So we are quite bullish on this market, and I think human psychology can sometimes work against investors. So when Bitcoin was trading at 20,000, everyone was really bullish on this market. Now we're at 8,000 and people are much more cautious, but I think this is actually the time to invest in this market. So we're quite bullish and think this is a good time to deploy capital. Personally, I think we've seen the low in Bitcoin, for example, for this year. I think some of the smaller coins probably have still some downside in them. But that's a summary of the performance so far and a little bit what we see. So we've been really concentrating our research around a few verticals in the crypto ecosystem. What we think will be the building blocks in this important building blocks in this new asset class going forward. So one big application, and I think the big use case we've seen in crypto assets so far is money-like crypto. So there, of course, the big one is Bitcoin. But you wouldn't just invest in Bitcoin or Ethereum. If you think about the stock market, you wouldn't just buy Google and Facebook. You really want to build a diversified portfolio. So that's our thinking, and that's what we are doing. So when we look at the money verticals, we have different use cases within that vertical as well. So we have something like store of value, where I think Bitcoin is currently potentially playing a big role there. People are comparing something like Bitcoin to digital gold. And then you have other verticals within that as well. You have, for example, privacy coins. So privacy is important for financial institutions, and you really don't want your financial history and transactions to be on an open blockchain. So there are projects like Monero, for example. There's Zcash, which we happen to like. We think they have a good technology. And there are also new money-like crypto assets coming online. So, for example, this morning we had a phone call with the founder of a really exciting project. He's based in San Francisco. They're doing a new type of mining for this currency. So they're doing a proof proof of space and proof of time. In Bitcoin and some other coins, you have proof of work, which is very energy intense. So maybe there is a way to do a decentralized cryptocurrency around proof of space and proof of time. So these are really novel ideas. Most of the protocols we research, they are quite similar. So we are interested in finding crypto assets that are really different and quite novel ideas. So the founder behind the company we spoke to this morning is Bram Cohen, who founded BitTorrent. So those are kind of the projects we look at Apollo. Projects with really good team behind them and really interesting technologies. I'm not sure yet if we will invest in this project, but these are kind of the interesting conversations we are having in the industry. And then there are other verticals as well that we think are interesting. So an obvious one is general purpose platforms. Ethereum is the big one there, and there are second and third generations general purpose platforms coming up as well. Like EOS is an example. They are launching their mainnet in June. There is Neo, for example. There is even newer projects like Definity that are coming online, and they are all trying to address different problems. So with Ethereum, there is scaling limits right now, and some of these projects are trying to address that. One concern addressing that problem is centralization. So if you can address the scaling issues while still being decentralized, that's something that's really interesting. The use case for blockchains is really decentralization. So if you can scale while still keeping some of that decentralization intact, or even improve on the decentralization, that's really interesting to us. So for example, EOS and Neo, they're trying to address the scaling issues with Ethereum, but then the question is, are these really decentralized, or are they going to be more centralized networks? So these are kind of things that we research. Another issue is the governance of these networks. So for example, in Bitcoin, I think the miners really resisted software upgrades like SegWit, and there are some projects trying to find a way to to govern these projects on what they call on-chain, on the blockchain itself, through voting mechanisms, etc. One famous project trying to do that is Tezos, and there are others as well trying to address this issue. Another one is funding. So in the early blockchain projects, they just was basically based on open source protocols that was released into the wild, so to speak, and there was no mechanism to basically fund the development of these projects. So that's another thing. Like Zcash, for example, that I mentioned, the privacy coin, they have a mining reward that goes to a company that works on developing this protocol. So we're seeing more of those kind of experimentations as well, finding a good way to fund these projects into the future, and make sure that they have good developers. They get paid for providing code and upgrades to these projects. And I think the overall kind of metric that we look at is decentralization. So I think that's key to all these protocols we look at. And talking about decentralization, well, I think one interesting vertical that we look at is decentralized exchanges, because I think that's one central security hole in Bitcoin and crypto at the moment. Exchanges get hacked, even though regulation will help. But I think we will see potentially more decentralized exchanges going forward. So there are a couple of interesting projects working on that, like the T0X, is one of them. I think Binance has announced that they will do a decentralized exchange as well, and there are many other projects working on that. Still early days, I think most of these decentralized exchanges are only working in one ecosystem, like Ethereum, and maybe with atomic swaps with different technologies. In the future, we will have decentralized exchanges working across blockchains, and I think so far we have seen this kind of like clunky decentralized exchanges, but the technology is really developing really quickly. So that's one area that we have a keen eye on, I would say. And the other, I would mention a few other verticals as well that are key in our research efforts. So one of them are security token platforms. So when we talk about security token platforms, we are talking about the potential to tokenize securities or real world assets. So that can be tokenized real estate. We can trade fractions of real estate on the blockchain in the future. And there will be platforms and ecosystems and standards for trading these tokens. So there are a few projects working on that, like Harbor is one that was recently founded by, I think they just raised another round from people like, or VC firms like Andersson, for example. T0 is another one where you have the founder of Overstock closely related to that project. We have Polymath, for example, is another of those security token platforms. So that's a huge potential for crypto assets. If we can securitize or tokenize securities, it could be today's illiquid assets like Visa interest, like real estate, and it can also be maybe further in the future today's liquid assets like stocks, bonds, commodities, etc. I will mention two more verticals that are core to our research efforts, and that's stable coins. I think that's really interesting area, and I think we have seen some really interesting projects recently in that field. From Australia, we have seen Haven, which is a really interesting project, and they just got listed the other week. We also have projects like Basecoin, for example. One we really like is Maker and MakerDAO, which is a decentralized stablecoin. So today, the most popular stablecoin is probably Tether. Many people have heard about Tether. It's backed by US dollar, but it's centralized. So it's a central company behind Tether. And if you can create a stable coin that is decentralized and everyone can audit, that's really a holy grail for crypto and stable coins. And I think Maker is a project that are doing some really interesting work in that field. So they have a stable coin called DAI, and they have a governance coin called Maker. And they have a collateralized system where Ether is the collateral behind DAI currently, but I believe that later this year, maybe next quarter, they will enable more kind of assets backing DAI. So that's one really interesting project that we've been looking at. I think the last one I would mention is cross-blockchain platforms. So if you can connect different blockchains in the future, that would be really interesting. If you can represent Bitcoin or Ether on one chain, that's really connecting the ecosystem, and that's could be a difficult problem, but I think there's some really smart people working on that. So we have projects like Cosmos and Polkadot, for example, to recent ICOs. They're not trading yet as tokens, but that's just a couple of projects that are working on cross-blockchain platforms that we think are really interesting. So technology-wise, some really interesting things are happening in the crypto ecosystem. So um, it's easy to get caught in the headlines about the price, but if we look at the technology, there's some really interesting, exciting developments in Bitcoin. For example, the transaction fees are down to only cents to send a Bitcoin today. Segwit adoption is up to around 25% today, and Lightning Network is a new kind of network to enable micropayments and small payments on kind of like a second layer on top of Bitcoin. Other developments, similar developments are happening on things like Ethereum as well. I think Lightning Network is really exciting in Bitcoin. I think I looked today, there are over 1,400 Lightning nodes on top of the Bitcoin main net today. There are 12,900 payment channels on the Lightning Network. So this is really exciting, and it will enable new use cases for Bitcoin. It's not just a store of value or a potential digital gold. It can also be a settlement layer. It can be used for micropayments if something like Lightning Network takes off, and it can be used for machine-to-machine payments, etc. So some really exciting developments underneath, and people are really building out the software of these projects quite fast on some of them. So so you wouldn't think that that we have such development just looking at the price, I think. And I think during the quarter we've also seen some prominent people coming out in support of crypto. We've seen some people like the founder of Twitter, Jack Dorsey, saying that Bitcoin might be the global reserve currency in 10 years. He's the founder of Square as well, and they are implementing Bitcoin payments on the Cash App linked to Square in the US, I believe. We have prominent VC people supporting crypto for a long time. We have had people like Mark Andreessen, Richard Branson, Tim Draper, etc., supporting crypto. And last month we had Peter Thiel getting interviewed in New York. I think it was at the New York Economic Forum, and he listed crypto as one of the most interesting investment opportunities right now in the world. And he thinks most of the smart people are attracted to crypto, and that it's a force for good. So it's really great to see these top investment professionals and founders and entrepreneurs embracing this fledgling new asset class. And maybe just a few words on where we've seen the market and the outlook here. So as I mentioned, Bitcoin bottomed on February 6th, I think, just over 6,000. I think the intraday low for Bitcoin was in the 5,700 or so. And from there we're up quite a bit in BTC. I think today we are trading around 8,000. Many of the other coins have continued down though, so I think there's been a flight to quality. I think in the beginning of the year everything was moving down with a high correlation, so everything moved down together. Since Bitcoin bottomed, I think we've seen high quality coins and projects really getting ahead of some of the smaller, lower quality coins. So I think a lot of the smaller coins are still close to the lows, while there's been a flight to quality. The Bitcoin sort of dominance index has gone from 38% at the beginning of the year to 45% today. And I think we're also seeing the same thing with ICOs. So we've seen the one-day return in ICOs come down quite a bit. I think if you look at the ICO statistics, they still look very high, but I think there is a lag in the statistics. So so usually they don't record the ICO raised, the amount of money raised in an ICO until they are closed. So since the fundraising times have been getting longer, there is a greater lag in that kind of statistics. But yeah, we're quite bullish in for the market here, especially for the high quality projects. And I think there's still some really interesting projects coming online, even on the ICO front. We see some really good projects out there. And I think we have really good access to our network. We have some of the top advisors on the ICO side as advisors to the fund, so that's really great. We have fantastic deal flow, but we're just being very, I would say, selective when it comes to that market. And with that, I think we can move over to some Q&A. So hopefully you sent in some questions, and my colleague Tim have just written some of them down for me here. So the first question, the return of minus 34%, how concentrated was it, this? I.e. how many up and how many down? So this is a really good question. Most of the crypto market was down in March, so it was really concentrated, but we saw a big difference. So a lot of coins were down in March, but some coins were down a lot more. If you think about it, I think a majority of the crypto assets were down more than 80% from their peak in December. And while some of the, I would say, better quality projects may be down 60% or 70%, some coins were even down 90%. So if you think about it, something that is down 80% has to go down another 50% to be down 90% from the peak. So even if the numbers look similar, there's huge differences in returns. So there were quite a big difference in kind of returns in March, even though most of the coins were down quite a bit. For our portfolio, I think we had 3 ICO investments, for example, as I mentioned. One of them are down quite a bit, while the other 2 have actually been doing quite well. And I think Bitcoin and Ethereum is interesting, that dynamic in March. So Bitcoin in the portfolio did better than most other coins. Something like Ethereum, for example, suffered quite a bit the last few weeks. And I think one reason for that is that Ethereum became almost like an index fund for ICOs. So if you think about it, to participate in the ICO market, you need to, in many cases, send in Ether to Ethereum smart contract. So a lot of these projects are sitting on Ethereum, and they might not have liquidated those Ether because the market was really strong at the end of last year. So they're probably pretty happy with the increases in the funds raised, just because the price of Ether had increased so much. But they have payments to pay in fiat. So when the market turned down, they need to start selling Ether. And as less people put money in ICOs, that means there is bigger selling pressure and less demand. So it all comes down to supply and demand. So I think Ether suffered more than some other coins, just because there had been a very popular fundraising platform for ICOs. So that's was one interesting dynamic in the portfolio in March. I think looking from the peak, or from the start of the year, we have only seen very few coins being up. So we just put out a quarterly letter. I think there will be a link on the website as well. And I think there are only a couple of coins that are up from the beginning of the year. I think one of them is Binance coin. It's been doing really well. Other coins are down quite a bit, but again, there's a big difference in performance. So things like Monero has outperformed, things like Bitcoin has outperformed some of the lesser known projects. All right, next question. Any lessons learned from the March return? Well, one lesson is that volatility is still great in uh, this industry, but that's nothing new. So that didn't come as a surprise um, to us. But I think it's the correlation within crypto is still very high, and I think that is going to change going forward. So I think we will see bigger differences in returns going forward. And I think one reason why the space is so correlated um, still is that when you trade many of the altcoins, they are based in BTC or ETH. So everything is based on Bitcoin or Ethereum. I think once we have more decentralized exchanges, we can trade altcoins in any other crypto assets, and I think that will increase the sort of the dispersions in returns. Um, I think another lesson is that, you know, it, even though we were down quite a bit in March, I think it's good to be able to be flexible and have a decent cash position to deploy into interesting projects. And I think we really learned already in February that the sort of coming into the market at the end of the ICO boom and being at the front of this market, we learned what is the supply in ICOs, and we are getting so many pitches in ICOs to us on a daily basis. So I think we learned really quickly that we really have to be really selective when it comes to the ICO market. So we're quite happy with that so far. But otherwise, we are investing for the long term. So so we just have to remain focused. I think is the lesson on quality projects, and we can research these markets in a structured way. And I think with the additional resources we have in hiring additional analysts, we really have the resources to do that going forward. So we're quite excited about that. Okay, next question. What kind of business do you expect to generate the best returns from? A platform, something social, something financial instruments, something servicing a marketplace? So that's a really good question. Where would the biggest returns be? We think the biggest return in the medium term, at least, will be from building out the ecosystem of crypto assets. So we think it's probably a bit too early for the consumer apps. So we have seen only a few consumer apps take off. Maybe something like earn.com, where you can earn money from your email, is an early application of crypto that is successful. But otherwise, it's more about building the platforms for the future services and products for this ecosystem. Money, of course, is an early and store of value is an early application, if you like. So I think still in the near to medium term, we have to focus on those kind of opportunities and not get too carried away by applications that might be 5 or 10 years out in time. That's sort of how we're looking at it. Q1 was challenging. Do you think Q2 will be better? Yeah, I think we've seen at least the bottom of the market in some of the high quality projects. So we're quite bullish on this market. April have started great, so we've seen a fantastic rebound in the market so far. Of course, it's going to be volatile. The space has always been really volatile. I think the nice thing from an investor standpoint is that crypto is not correlated to anything else. So it doesn't really matter what happens with the stock market, with the bond market, and so on. It's still very uncorrelated, and I think that potential big return in crypto combined with the great benefit of diversification really means that crypto is a potential holy grail for an investor. We're not saying put all your money into crypto, but we're saying put a smaller part of your portfolio into crypto, because you can really diversify your portfolio, and you can really increase the risk return characteristics of a portfolio. You can increase the potential return, and the low correlation actually means that you can decrease the overall risk of a diversified portfolio by including a little bit of crypto in your portfolio. So I think that really is a appealing case for crypto. And I think the other big upside this year will be institutional investors. So I think that's something we could talk a lot about, but we haven't seen many institutional investors really getting into crypto. We have interesting developments when it comes to custody of crypto assets, and I think once we have more of those sort of solutions that are coming online right now, actually, then we will see institutional players coming into crypto. And we've already seen announcements from family offices like Soros, from Rockefeller, and so on, talking about entering the crypto market. So I think those are the early signs, and I think we will have more kind of bigger institutions as well. We are hearing that Barclays is opening a crypto desk. Goldman Sachs, for example, has been talking about that as well. And we have some big investment managers like Wellington potentially looking at adding crypto directly in portfolios. So I think these are really exciting times. It's been driven by retail investors, but institutional money are coming into crypto, and we're still very early days. So still fantastic upside, I think, in the crypto market, but it's going to remain volatile. So I think we really have to look at this for the long time horizon, like we are doing at Apollo. I hope I could answer most of your questions. You're always welcome to contact me directly if you have more questions, and I hope to see you next time. And again, our applications for next month close next week. So if you want to participate from next month, please get your applications to us as soon as possible. Thank you.